Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick unboxing of the Sony SEL20TC. This is a 2x teleconverter for a limited lineup of Sony full-frame E-mount glass, and I've already reviewed it. The reason you're seeing an unboxing is because now I've purchased it. So if you caught my full review, which of course was based around a loaner from Sony, you already know that, well, this has been on the market for a while. It's nothing new, but it's still just as competent as the day it launched, but more compelling now because it works with a wider array of glass. So at $548, that is the retail price, I think it is a relative bargain. Some may look at it as overpriced, but when you take into account what this accomplishes for some of the best lenses in Sony's telephoto lineup, I think it is an absolute must-have for anyone looking to travel a little bit lighter, understanding the trade-off of using one of these. Now, it does also come in a 1.4 variety, but for me personally, even though that, of course, will do a little bit better in low light than this, I would rather have 2x teleconversion. So some paperwork in here, I'm going to leave that alone, and let's just get to the actual teleconverter itself. So you get this little travel case, fairly compact, but that's because the teleconverter is. And you know, when this originally launched, it didn't support too much in the way of glass, but now here we are many years later, and it's actually got a pretty decent lineup of glass that it supports. So in my case, I will be using this specifically with, let me grab the lenses here. I've got my tried and true the 1-400 G Master, and this is probably my favorite pairing for this, specifically because you still remain as light as you pretty much can, because the 1-400 GM is really compact. I'm not going to say it's incredibly light, but really compact for its focal range, and its fidelity and overall performance is excellent. And in my experience using this, again, if you caught my full review, you know, just understanding that this won't be optimal for birds in flight. I mean, I was able to, over time, get better at shooting birds in flight with it. It's better for, I would say, static objects. So if those birds are just hanging out as opposed to actually taking off, flying, you're going to do better. Also, you need about as much light as you possibly can. If you try to shoot this in low light, you aren't going to be happy with the results, and that's just part of using a teleconverter. That's the trade-off. But when you think about the fact that that turns this, 400 millimeter reach into 800 without doubling, the size of the lens, even at the expense of the stops that you lose, my experience was excellent. And autofocus really didn't suffer that much. I expected it to kind of fall apart because, after all, this is a shortcut, isn't it, to 800 millimeters. Another lens that I tested it with, but in my opinion, it's great that it adds the reach, but less of a necessity is the affordable yet gigantic 200 to 600 mil lens. And this is an exceptional piece of glass for its price, in my opinion. Some people differ on that opinion. I'm not one of them. That's the reason I own it, demoed it, flirted with buying it, and eventually caved. And it is an excellent lens, very big, especially if, like me, you've got any back problems, not ideal. If you don't have back problems, you're not going to have a problem, but eventually you might have back problems. Either way, the point is that with this adapter, of course, now you're looking at 1,200 millimeters of reach. Not as, I would say, optimal as the experience with the 1-4, because the G Master is a little bit faster. Of course, neither of these are prime, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. But overall performance is still good with the 2-6, just not as good as the performance with the 1-4. And also, again, the 1-4 reiterates the traveling light element. The 2-6, less so, even though the zoom is internalized as opposed to a pumper here on the right. It's just one of those things. It's a trade-off, that's inherent. Now, this does also work with the 70 to 200 mil lens, starting with Gen 1, and of course going to the GM, and then, of course, the GM Mark II. And I actually, right now in studio, have the GM Mark II. It just came in. So this is yet another lens that you can potentially use this with, and I plan on testing it with this. Now, I did not have this lens, of course, back when I tested out the original teleconverter when I did the review. So this will be an interesting pairing to see how well it works. And take into account the fact that this is f2.8. So unlike these two telephoto lenses, here we actually have something that has, I would say very good performance across its entire range. So we'll see how well the 2x teleconverter works with this lens. But, the previous two generations are compatible. Again, the G Master Mark I and, of course, the f4 lens that I did own for many years and eventually parted ways with once I picked up this guy right here. So that pretty much is the lineup that I plan on using this teleconverter with. And if you caught my full review, then you know that part of what I was struggling with was whether or not to keep this lens or this lens. And in my mind, the teleconverter tells me that really all I need is the G Master, especially since it performs better with the teleconverter. But, I'd be lying if I told you I don't love the 2-600. Of course, the 2-600 really lives a better life on a monopod or tripod. The 1-4 is more suitable for handheld use. And that's probably the reason I haven't given one of these up yet. But, in time, that may change. For now, I'm still trying to figure it out, but this was an obvious addition to my gear bag and, just my overall collection of capability in Sony's lineup of full frame goodness, because this is a game changer if, like me, you don't always want to break out that 2-600 in order to get a subject that otherwise would be unattainable. As for the G Master Mark II, we'll see what that pulls off, because that will effectively make this a 400mm lens, of course, at the expense of some stops, but starting at f2.8 should be a advantageous thing, of course. But that pretty much rounds it out. These are the lenses, again, that I plan on using it with, primarily these guys. This will only be a few weeks. But wanted to share it with all of you because I really do think this teleconverter is worth every dollar, even though I'm very late to the game. I waited until it made sense, which I feel like is what you should do in life with pretty much anything. Don't jump into anything too soon. I mean, I'm not saying don't be an early adopter. I do that all the time. But in this case, it didn't make sense to pick up the teleconverter until I had glass that really justified that $500 and nearly $50 price point. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe and please stay safe. Later.